One thing about people from St. Louis got the most prideful people ever. If anybody from St. Louis and they go out of town, they gonna tell you where they from. When I grew up with a single mom, my dad was around, but I lived with my mom. They had me, I think they was seniors in high school or right after they graduated high school. So, they was young and, growing up in St. Louis with, not having much.
I remember the nights we didn't have anything to eat. And 2 doors down, I remember our neighbor named Donna. She fed us many a nights. I would walk out and I would go over there and I would knock on the door and she'd give us the chicken pot pie and we'd heat it up and my mom would let me eat the middle of it and she'd eat the crust on the outside.
I think just the way that she raised me, never letting me make excuses that, whether the circumstances that, ultimately in the real world, having that mentality that nobody's gonna feel bad for you, that you have to go take everything that you want. And from a young age, from my mom learning that, I've carried that all the way.
Neither one of my parents ever were soft or took it easy on me. They were extremely tough on me, and kind of pushed the limit sometimes. But I wouldn't change it because it was what I needed to get to this point.
Jayson Tatum's support system had helped raise him out the mud in St. Louis. But as much as they had helped him grow up in a tough environment, just surviving wasn't enough. A young JT already knew he had bigger dreams.
Being in a classroom where kids wanted to be doctors or lawyers, because that's what they saw growing up. Their parents were doctors and lawyers or nurses or pilots. And then I said, I want to be an NBA player. I want to be the best player in the world. And she said, you need to be more realistic. That's probably not going to happen. And I remember everybody laughing. And that was one of the lowest points because I already felt, intimidated going to school. I stood out. It's like I kind of didn't belong. And then for her to say that and everybody to kind of laugh, that really, it crushed me. And, as an 8, 9-year-old kid, I cried. And I never really cried. I'm not an emotional person. I remember my mom wiping my face and telling me that she told me, she was like, remember this moment. Never let anybody tell you what you can or can't do.
I've always had one dream, one goal is to be an NBA. And Kobe was talking and he was saying that his whole life, he put all his eggs in one basket. And if you have that mindset that there's no backup, there's no plan B, there's no backup plan, that you would do anything to make that first plan work. And I took that to heart. And as soon as I could start watching and remembering, Kobe was it for me. I was like, hey, I want to be Kobe. And my mom was like, no, you want to be a player you want to be in the NBA like Kobe. I'm like, no, I want to be Kobe. I want to wear the fro. I want number 8. That was I loved, he was Jordan for me. And he was the reason I started playing basketball.
I was always better than everybody in my age group in St. Louis. I was always taller. And I remember my first time going to AAU Nationals was in New Orleans in fourth or fifth grade. So I was 9 or 10. And in my mind at the time, I thought I was the best 10-year-old in the world. I just thought I was so much better than everybody else. And I might have been half as good as everybody else. It was such an eye-opener for me, and it made me realize I got so far to go to be as good as those guys or to reach my ultimate goal.
My pops was he was the one who put the ball in my hand from as early as I could remember. And from 3 till I was 14, he was my coach, the person I worked out with, and taught me everything I know, about the game, especially at that age.
I feel like I missed out on a father-son relationship.
me and my dad only ever went to games or practice and to get haircuts. Like, we didn't go to amusement parks. We didn't go to picnics or fishing or like really have father-son talks, because it was just all basketball. He was extremely tough on me, like cussed me out in front of everybody, you know, embarrass me, humiliate me, throw the ball at me, just because he wanted, in his eyes, he wanted me to be the toughest. He wanted me to be the best, and that was his way of like, if he made me upset, I would play better. And in a sense, I did, right? I would get so upset, I would get so angry that I would play better.
You know, he knew I was gonna be tall, and he didn't want, you know, somebody to just label me as a big man, so he wanted me to play the perimeter. But, you know, when you're young, everybody just wanted to shoot threes and do floaters, try to smack the glass so you can dunk. Right. So with me, you know, he wanted me to try to be different, you know, try to be able to score from everywhere. So we would go in the gym and, you know, we would just jab step in the middle of the floor and jab step on the wing, you know, one dribble to the right, one dribble to the left, to like, that was just like all I knew. And then I started remember, I had YouTube, and Kobe was my favorite player. And I remember one day he came in the gym and I just started doing like turnaround fadeaways. But I was like, yo, that's my favorite play. And I would practice it on my own until it became a part of my game.
Drew Hanlon, I started working out with him. He was training David Lee and Brad Beal at the time. He's another St. Louis guy. When I was in 8th grade. And I think that's when I kind of took a bigger leap in my basketball development.
You know, most of my clients when I started working with Jay were pros or college guys that were going to be pros, and so typically I didn't start working with players until they were in high school. And so his mom reached out when he was an 8th grader. I said, you know, he's a little bit too young. I want to, you know, get him a little bit older so that he can kind of grasp some of the high-level nuances and skills that I want to cover with him. And you know, sure enough, Brad Beal's his, you know, big brother, and I've been working with Brad since he was 13 years old. So he shot me a text and was just like, hey, I'm telling you, my little brother Jason's going to be special. Give him a chance. And we got in the gym. The first time we ever worked out, absolutely destroyed him. Like almost tried to make him pass out. Mom had texted me and was like, it was pretty cool. Jason in the car after the workout was like, Mama, you guys were gonna have to carry me off the floor before I gave up. And that's when I knew he had the mentality.
Going into high school, my freshman year, I was like 6'3" maybe. And then over the summer, by the time I was a sophomore, I was like 6'7". So I think 8th grade to sophomore year, I kind of grew about 5, 6 inches. You know, once I got to high school, that's when, like I tell people all the time, after my freshman year of high school, that's when it hit me that like, damn, I could make it in the NBA is more and more a reality.
I think being a high school star, especially growing up with social media, camera phones was out, so I wasn't like a normal high school kid.
There were a couple high school players that were on my radar, and Tatum was one of them. He had this like YouTube video called like the God of Mid-Range or something like that. So I was very aware of who Tatum was.
So when I turned 16, I had a car, and that's when I started my waking up at 5:45, 5:30, coming to the gym at 6:15. I love walking into an empty gym and being the first person to turn the lights on. Like that feeling is hard to describe, because this is like, you know, this is my life. It's what I've always wanted to do.
That's when I knew he was gonna make it, because I didn't have to wake him up. I'm not a morning person. You know, I joke with him and I'm like, listen, if God didn't raise the sun yet, then clearly he don't want me up. I'm not getting up when it's still dark outside. I didn't have to push him. That was something he wanted to do.
But there was always this idea that somebody was working harder than me, or when I wasn't working out, somebody else was, somebody in New York, somebody in LA. There was a handful of times I overslept, and those were like the worst days of my high school career, of the sense of like, I just felt terrible all day. My opportunity of my dream may have slipped away, and I think that level of fear really helped me get to this point.
Jayson's dedication to his craft would only continue to show on the court, as by the time he finished his junior year at Chaminade, he was already seen as one of the top players in the class of 2016. Of course, this meant drawing attention from the top college basketball programs across the country. And while plenty of schools would try to make a case for Tatum's commitment, only one stood out from the rest.
Duke was like something that didn't seem attainable. Like, it didn't, for me, it was like, yeah, I didn't hate Duke. Like, I thought it was amazing. They had the best players and a great coach, but I never was like Duke never gonna want me to come there.
But then I think when I took my visit, I was 16, my junior year, and just to see the relationship that Coach K had with his players, and I got to talk to Jaleel, Taj, Justice Winslow, and just to see how they talked about Coach when he wasn't around.
Just to see how well the players interacted with one another, and how they all kind of would like run through a wall for Coach K, and just hearing the plans that he had for me, and what my 1 year at Duke was going to look like, and just hearing it from his mouth was like kind of the encouragement, the validation. Especially at 16, I remember my hands were sweating. I was speechless just listening to him talk and tell it, and just it was amazing to hear how highly he thought of me at only 16. I was sold immediately. I wanted to commit when I was there, and I remember my dad and mom was like, "We only took one visit, you're only a junior high school, like give the other schools a chance." Like, I know where I want to go.
In my junior year, they won the national championship, and like 2 or 3 days later after they won, Coach K, they flew to my house, and I had an in-home visit.
Having Coach K at my house I couldn't believe it. Like, Coach K came to U-City, like he came to my house, like this little ass house. And John Shire and Coach Capel was there. And it was right after they won. And I was extremely quiet. I'm quiet now, I was really quiet back then, especially around people I didn't really know. And I remember when he came, they, talked about how, they wanted me to come to Duke and the plans that they had for me. And the meeting, it was like it was about to be over. They were putting their jackets on, about to leave. And I remember I told my mom and dad, I was like, "Mom, when they come, I'm gonna tell them." The whole time, I was sitting there sweating, like, all right, I wanna say it. But I was so, like, nervous. And I remember my dad, Coach K stood up. He was like, "Coach, before you leave, I think Lil Jay wanna say something." I was like, "Coach, I wanna come to Duke." He was like, "Holy." And he was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to come to Duke." And then they sat back down and we all like hugged each other, and they stayed for like another 2 hours. That was like one of the, cooler days that, of my life.
That was kind of like one of the guys in the class that we knew was a lock for a while, just based on some comments that he made and how fast his recruitment went. And so having a guy like that come to your favorite school is such a fun feeling, knowing that they want to be there and they weren't kind of coerced or sold into going there.
Durham, North Carolina, a place many see as the embodiment of college basketball. Whether you love them or love to hate them, there's no denying that Duke represents one of the most iconic brands in college sports, and it's done so for decades.
Duke, that was like the most fun I ever had in my life. Just being a college kid, first time away from home, kind of, got more responsibilities, becoming like a young man, living on your own. That was new to me, and I enjoyed it. I had fun.
I would say expectations were probably a little bit higher than I would say they should have been, and maybe higher than we would have for a class like that these days. And I would say of all the freshmen, Jayson Tatum blew them out of the water. He was the guy from day one.
Sidelined with a foot injury early on, Tatum would be forced to miss the first 8 games of the regular season for recovery. But when the highly touted 5-star recruit finally made his debut in blue, it wouldn't take long to see what all the hype was about.
The double crossover gets all the way to the rim for the layup. And he just gave a tiny little fake and was able to freeze and go right around him.
College was so much fun. Just being at Duke and understanding how much pride and history comes with that.
Jayson Tatum from St. Louis, Missouri is an outstanding player. He can go down into the post. He can put the ball on the deck. He's got 3-point range. And he has been really good all season long.
Being on the center stage every night, I feel like every game we played was on TV and the target was always on our back, and being in the UNC rivalry.
Make him guard. Tatum slamming it home for the Blue Devils. May on a run out. Rejected by Tatum.
I think the biggest thing with Tatum, and it's always been even when he was at Duke, was just the pro style of play that he plays with. He talked about a lot growing up and trying to mirror his game after Kobe Bryant. To me, it was very similar to that, and just the way he went about his business, very pro-like. I never really thought that like the moment was too big for him. Duke struggled a little bit during the season, and he always seemed to step up in the big moments.
I watched a lot of his Duke games. In the second half of his Duke season, I think he was the best player in college basketball.
That's here. They'll clear the floor.
Got it! Jayson Tatum continuing to put on a show.
I think raw talent, he's a top 5 player in Duke history. There's not many guys that I would put ahead of Jayson Tatum, because just he could do it all. He didn't shoot super well from 3 that year, but you could see that shot was there. You could see in the size and his length that he could take anybody in college really one-on-one in ISO and get a bucket. And that's kind of what we hadn't seen a lot of at Duke, but now that's kind of where the NBA is going. You need to be able to get a bucket. You got to go to your one guy, and that's kind of what Duke had and Jayson Tatum at the time.
Despite not achieving their goal of a national championship, Jayson Tatum had managed to put together an impressive freshman campaign for the Blue Devils, averaging 22 points and 7.5 rebounds on his way to all ACC honors. Duke had given Tatum the platform to showcase exactly why he was already being named a top prospect in the upcoming NBA draft. And with an opportunity to make his childhood dream a reality, JT was left with a big decision to make.
It was an easy decision because it's like, man, ever since I was 3, I was like, I wanted to play in the NBA. But then it was like, once I got that opportunity, I actually thought about it for a second, like, man, part of me want to come back to Duke and try to win a national championship, because I really enjoyed my time at Duke that much, and the relationship I built with my teammates, and that's real.
I remember I called Coach. He was like, "Did you declare yet?" I was like, you don't want me to stay? Like, you want me to come back?" He was like, "No, you gotta go." I was like, "All right, you right."
I made the best decision for me and my family. And at the time, I knew that, I was about to I was expecting a son. So that was the best decision for myself and my family.
As the 2017 NBA draft quickly approached, Tatum would see his name consistently listed as a lock for the top 5. But with a pair of talented guards in Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball also pushing for top spots, questions remained about what 19-year-old Jayson Tatum actually brought to the table.
My initial thought was there was a high ceiling, but it was hard. It was difficult to gauge how close he was to hitting that ceiling. So I think that's, for the most part, was the big reason why Markelle Fultz was the guy, especially that summer going into the draft. So Tatum was on my radar. Obviously, he was on a lot of people's radar, but if I'm being completely honest, it was like 50-50.
Before the lottery happened, I wrote, I would take Jayson Tatum at 2, and I don't care who knows it. Meaning, I'd take Markelle Fultz at 1 because he was the consensus number 1, but Tatum was my second favorite prospect in that draft.
Because I remember Boston had the number 1 pick, and everybody, it was kind of like known, like the media was saying, like Markelle was going number 1. Lonzo was in LA, so everybody knew Lonzo was going to the Lakers. I didn't even work out for the Lakers because I just knew, me and my agent was like, it's going to be a waste of time.
Like everybody know Lonzo going number 2. So at the time, Philly was 3 and Phoenix Suns was 4. So Philly, Phoenix, and Boston, they came. I was in LA working out. So they came to watch me work out. And I remember, I sat down and talked to them. And after I met with them all, I remember I was like, I think I'm going to Philly. Like they had the 3rd pick. I had a good workout and I talked to Brett Brown and everything was cool. So I thought I was going to Philly. But then I remember I went to Phoenix. This was a week before the draft. I went to Phoenix just to meet with Earl Watson and talk to the GM and see the facility. I didn't work out, I just wanted to go meet with everybody. The next day, I remember he picked me up. He had a white G-Wagon. He drove me around and showed me like all the houses where the players live at. I remember I called my fam, my mom, I'm like, yo, I think I want to go to Phoenix. Like Earl Watson, he was like, yo, you come to Phoenix, UND book. Like he was like 2 light-skinned killers. I'm gonna let y'all rock out. I'm sitting in the car, I'm like, man, this sounds good. Like, yeah, like I think I want to come here.
My agent called me, and I was like, I think I had a flight that night to go back home because this was now like a week before the draft. He was like, yo, tomorrow, once you go back to St. Louis, I need you to pack a bag because you're flying to Boston. I'm like, why am I going to Boston? He like, it's not out yet, but they're gonna trade the 1st pick and they're gonna give it to 3rd and they want to see you work out again.
I'm like, nah, I don't want to go to Boston. Like I like it out here in Phoenix. Like it's cool. The weather nice. I get a big house. I get a pool. My mom gonna be all right. He's like, Brad Stevens, a great young coach, and they got a great history. I'm like, I'm not trying to hear that. Like, I want to go to Phoenix. So then my agent was like, just think about it. And then so we hang up. I'm like, I'm not going to this workout. Like, I'm cool.
15 minutes later, Coach K calls me. I'm like, what's up, Coach? How you doing? He's like, hey, I just spoke to Boston, and I think Brad is a great young coach, and I think would be a great fit for you. They're going to trade the pick, and they want to see you work out again. I think you should go. I'm not going to tell Coach K no. So I'm like, all right, I'd go. I didn't want to, not because I didn't like Boston. I just didn't think I was going to play or I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do.
So I remember I flew to St. Louis that night. The next day, I flew to Boston for another workout in Boston. So this was like 3 days before the draft.
I had a good feeling, but they didn't tell me or my agent that they were going to pick me. So I had no idea. I figured it would be Boston or Phoenix. I figured I was going 3 or 4.
What they don't show you is right before they call your name, all the cameras run over to the table because they know who's about to get called. And Adam Silver came out, and the cameras ran to me. He starts talking, and they leave, and they go to another player's table. And I remember my heart dropped. And I looked at my mom, I'm like, why did they just do that? They not gonna pick me? And they ran back over. And I remember I put my head down and they said,
with the 3rd pick in the 2017 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics select Jayson Tatum.
It was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. It was like I was living in a dream, and I stood up and I gave my mom the biggest hug I could. And I remember I told her, I said, we did it.
My initial thought was Danny did it again. Man, like he pulled this one off because even if Tatum didn't pan out, it was worth the risk in my opinion. And it's tough to find a superb, standout wing, never mind someone who obviously evolved into one of the best scorers in the NBA. We didn't know that at the time, but I like the Celtics putting their bet on that instead of going with Fultz. So I was excited.
It kind of reminded me of being at Duke. Just so much winning history and tradition, and seeing all the banners they got up there, and all the media attention. Duke really prepared me to go to Boston. And, everything happened for a reason, and it worked out really well.
After months of preparation, the beginning of Jayson's rookie season was finally here. But as he geared up for his first game as a Celtic, even Tatum himself could have never imagined just how his NBA career would begin.
I'll paint a picture. So the hours before his NBA debut, I'm in Cleveland and he's getting ready for a shoot around. He's putting his sneakers on, and there isn't a single reporter. Actually, no, I was next to him getting ready to ask the questions, and there was no one else near him. Everybody was near Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. And the reason why I want to paint that picture for everyone is because I just think it's so significant when you think about how everything changed so quickly, right? Fast forward to not even an hour into that game, Gordon Hayward's hurt.
You know, Celtics fan remember that game for the Hayward injury, but if you remember, Tatum had 18 against LeBron in his first game as a rookie. Like, if that's not an omen for good things to come, I don't know what is.
Honestly, I didn't know how much, I would play. Just like you said, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals the year before. We had Kyrie, we had Al, and Gordon. He was starting before me. I mean, I did start the first game because we went small. Cleveland went small. Unfortunately, when Gordon got hurt, you never want to see that happen to anybody. But, I think, I kind of knew in my head that, I was going to get an opportunity, to show what I can do.
Tatum to the basket. Fourth rebound for Morris off the bench. Tatum with the dribble and the pull-up. Got it. Are you kidding me right now? Mike, are you kidding me right now? There you go. There you go, young fella.
I would say Tatum had the benefit that a lot of top 3 picks or even top 10 picks don't have, that he went into a team in an ecosystem where he wasn't expected to be like the man immediately.
Kyrie takes the rebound away. Tatum got it.
Just when you first get to the league, it's like you trying to prove a point and prove to everybody that you belong, and not only belong, but that you're gonna be one of the best players. And that's the mindset I had from the first game. As a young player, that's really big. You're trying to make a point and let it be known that you deserve to be in the league.
I always said it was like he had the length and the shot sort of set up as Durant, but like the footwork of Pierce.
Tatum, another deep 2. He knocks that down. Boy, is that been one of his great moves. Oh, Tatum! Gorgeous move to the basket. Tatum in the paint for 2.
He was able to transition so easily to the pro level just based on his style of play that obviously he was going to come with some shooting woes, just some transitioning to the size and everything like that. But the game, the shot making, that was all there.
Targeted. Inside, Tatum again.
You could tell there was something there. But, the physicality was a little much for him. He had to bulk up. He had to learn the game. But as the season went along, it was immediately obvious he belonged.
Tatum gets past and throws it down. Jayson Tatum.
For someone like Tatum in his rookie season, where he wasn't even getting all that much attention, I thought it was impressive how he was able to hold his own and grow throughout that rookie year.
Having averaged just under 14 points per game as a rookie, Tatum would once again be tested in his first NBA season. The playoffs meant that Jayson would be forced to adjust to the intensity of the postseason, and do so as a key member of the league's most historic franchise. A roster that was missing its 2 best players.
Gordon Hayward's out for the year. Kyrie Irving's out for the playoffs. And nobody was expecting the Celtics to do much.
Tatum to the pass. Tatum to the basket.
That might have been probably the most fun I ever had playing basketball, because we kind of was starting to form our own identity that we was going to go into the playoffs. And it was weird. We was a 2 seed, but nobody thought we was going to beat the Bucks, because I was 19 and JB was in his second year, and we had Terry and Smart and Mook. We had a bunch of underdogs and things like that. And that really boosted our confidence, because we had the home court advantage, and we were just we just felt like we had nothing to lose. So we beat the Bucks in 7. So then they was all right, that was a fluke. They're not gonna beat Philly. I think Philly beat Miami like 4-1, before that. So they was rolling. So they was like, they not gonna beat Philly.
For Boston, Tatum crossover, gets by Bellinelli. Speed dribble, leaving it up. Tatum throws it down.
And I think that Sixers series is really where kind of the legend of Jayson Tatum began.
And Tatum has the hot hand with 7 straight. Tatum with a little Smitty goes by.
Because the Sixers were huge favorites. As I recall, they were like plus 350, so like 3-1 favorites essentially to win that series. And they just had absolutely no answer for Jayson Tatum, Al Horford, and Terry Rozier.
It just happened so fast. I think when I envisioned myself, and I was thinking about playing in the league, was like, I don't want to just get there. I wanted to be the face. I wanted to be one of the best players, and my opportunity came a lot faster than it do for a lot of people, especially on the biggest stage in the playoffs, playing for the Celtics. So, I was young. We all was young, and we was all on rookie deals, and we just felt like we ain't had nothing to lose. We were supposed to lose, and we won the first round. We won the second round, and now we like, we about to go to the championship.
You go against the Cavs, LeBron James, Kevin Love, a great Cavs team, and it's not like Tatum looked lost.
In terms of the impact of the final result, Tatum on a pull-up. Timeout, Cavaliers. Tatum gets past Nance. Scoop layup is good. With 67 points, with 6:45 remaining. Tatum drives down and throws it down. Wow!
That was the loudest I heard the Garden that entire night. And obviously the way things ended, it wasn't ideal for Tatum and the Celtics, but it gave you that glimpse of, man, the future looks bright.
I was fully aware of what I had just done. Like right after the game, I remember as soon as the game ended, everybody, especially after the playoffs, you dap each other up, wish you the next, good luck and stuff. And I remember I had talked to Brian for like a minute straight. We were talking, and in that moment, I realized what I had just done, how close we were, and that was kind of the like, all right, I'm gonna be pretty good for a while. I think the world realized it. LeBron had realized it at that point. I was 20 years old, and I remember like obviously being upset. It was Game 7. Want to go to the finals, but I remember like, I'm gonna be pretty good at this.
It was in all ways that playoff run, and it was sort of like that dunk on LeBron was the icing on the cake of like his coming out party. Like, this is the dude to watch. Like, he is next up. Jayson Tatum has arrived much earlier than anyone predicted, and that dunk just signified all of it.
Following one of the most impressive rookie playoff runs in recent memory, Jayson Tatum had done more than just draw the interest of basketball fans around the world. He had caught the attention of a legend of the game, who just so happened to be his childhood hero.
He texted me, he was like, keep doing your thing. I'm watching, after the season, hit me up anytime you're in LA, we get some work together. I was like, I dropped my phone. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
So, we met like twice before we actually worked out. Like, I went to his office, and he showed me around when he was, writing books and stuff like that. And then we got to work out.
It was just a surreal moment because just looking at him, remembering myself when I was a toddler, just a young kid, watching him on TV and be like, that's who I want to be like. Like, this is why I love basketball, because he inspired me. Fast forward, now I'm 20 and I'm having a one-on-one interaction with him, working out on, like, I'm here working out with you because you inspired me without even knowing, like, easily. I mean, besides my son being born, that's like the best day of my life. Just to be in the gym with him and work out with him and learn some tips was just like I'll never forget that day, how I felt going into the workout, how I felt afterwards. I just felt like that was just like the coolest thing ever for me. And like, I'll never forget that.
After a subpar second NBA season, which saw Boston battling internal conflict, as well as Tatum learning through the growing pains that often come with a sophomore campaign, the 2019-2020 season signaled a new opportunity, and it was time for Jayson and the Celtics to once again return to contention in the East.
Going into my third season, we was coming off a down year where we lost in the second round. We had so many expectations and everything went south. And for me, I felt like this was my last opportunity because I didn't make the All-Star game my second year, and I was like I got to make that next jump so I can be that go-to guy, that star, make that leap in my third year. So that was a big focus for me.
I have to be so much better. We have to be better as a team. I got to make the All-Star game, for people to still kind of look at me as he still can be one of those guys. So, and I just had to look at, what I was doing on and off on the court, and how can I make the game easier for myself to kind of take that next step.
So you enter this third season where you don't really know where this team is going. We eschew Kyrie for Kemba Walker, who from a vibes perspective is like the biggest step up of all step ups. And the first half of that year, the team was pretty good. Like, they weren't bad. Tatum looked okay. Not okay. He looked good. I think he was averaging just under 20, slightly inefficient. And then January hit.
It was weird because I felt like on the inside, like I'm very confident. I feel like, I can compete with anybody. But there was also a part of me like, I can't say I'm one of the best because I didn't make the All-Star team. And there's like a stat, I guess I was averaging like 29 or 30 after I was named an All-Star. And it was, ironically enough, like once I found out I made it, it kind of was like, damn, like I'm not at that level yet, but it's like I belong.
And all of a sudden, he just started making every pull-up he took, it felt like.
Tatum for three.
Looking for Tatum. Gets it in. Tatum takes it. Makes it. Tatum trying to do his done. Does for the moment.
And I think he had like 40 against the Clippers.
Here's Tatum on the drive and scores!
He just had this like absurd February where he was averaging like high 20s on insane efficiency. And at that point, it was like, oh, the Celtics have themselves a superstar.
Tatum, step back three.
They have only one win on the road against an over 500 team. Oh, Jayson Tatum! Bring that smoke!
And then the season ended because of COVID.
The NBA has suspended its basketball season until further notice after a member of the Utah Jazz tested positive for the coronavirus.
But starting tomorrow, NBA play is suspended, and then the league is going to use that hiatus to decide their next steps, how they'll go forward.
The COVID-19 pandemic would put a halt to the NBA season and the world for the next several months. But as the idea for a bubble season in Orlando, Florida surfaced, Tatum and the Celtics would be given the opportunity to continue their pursuit of an NBA championship.
Tatum for three. That's good. Now he's down to 10 on the shot clock. Pulls up for three. Boston's way up by 7 with the ball. Tatum. The basket. Goodness.
I think the bubble was a significant point in his career. Just the fact that he put together one of those performances that essentially pushed the Celtics through to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that was a part that's something that he had to do to feel like, okay, now this is my team.
When the playoffs start, you're thinking like, well, I think this team's really good, but I'm not sure how good they are. And then it's just sort of the next step in the evolution of Tatum becoming a superstar. He averaged 25, 10, and 5 in that bubble playoff run, which I don't think people talk about enough. Like, that's an absurd stat line for like a 21, 22-year-old on good efficiency while playing good defense and being the best player on a team that makes the Eastern Conference Finals.
I feel like that was the first moment. That was the first postseason run where Tatum was maturing into becoming one of the pillars of the team, and no longer the young prospect who's still grooming.
Tatum fakes, pulls back, three-pointer, puts it in, and the Celtics regain the lead. Timeout. Deep three from Tatum. Yes, JT money. Olynyk on Tatum. Step back three, delivering.
I think that third season is really when he solidified himself as like, this is the like one of the next superstars of the NBA, because it's one thing to be like an all-star, right? It's one thing to be Karl Anthony Towns. It's another thing to be Kevin Durant. And that was the first instance where we're like, this guy might be an all-NBA guy, never mind an all-star. And that's a really big jump.
While the NBA would attempt a return to normal for the 2021 season, the shortened offseason paired with Boston's deep playoff run would result in disappointment for the Celtics the following year.
I think that year was actually one of the best things that ever could have happened to Jayson Tatum, because he had never really tasted failure. His biggest failure was losing in the second round. So like, sometimes you need to fail to become the best version of yourself. And that 21 year is when he got a taste of that.
And that's it. It's the end of the line for the Boston Celtics as the Brooklyn Nets will advance to round 2.
That short off season, going right into the next season, and the grueling like 4 games in 1 week that everybody was going through. But I just feel like it affected the Celtics at another level when you think about how deep they went into the playoffs, and Kemba Walker was just a shell of himself at that point. And I just thought it was a tough season for Brad Stevens. It just seemed like that he had lost his voice in that locker room, and that happens. You know, it's not about he did something wrong. It's just after a certain amount of years and lack of getting to that next level, that happens in the NBA. I mean, these guys make a lot of money, and they spent a lot of time with each other, and then to have like what was like a 3-week, 4-week off season to get themselves back on track, it was tough. It was just too much for them to bear.
From every time you lose, it's a lot to learn from. It's small little wins or lessons that you can take. And I felt like, obviously we had nothing to lose. Everybody expected them to win and go all the way. So, let's take it one game at a time. Let's make it tough for them. And we tried. We won game 3, I had 50, and game 4, I had 40-something, but we lost. But just knowing that KD and James and Kyrie was out there, and, them 3 are the best players in the world. And, regardless of how old I am, I want to go out there and say, I'm up there with y'all.
I think the loss motivated Tatum in particular because that hadn't happened to him at that point, right? He was used to making deep playoff runs, or at least getting into the second round.
I think he was supremely motivated to come into the next season, establish himself as a superstar, because there were still questions. So sort of the narrative flipped in a lot of ways about like, wow, he can't drag, he's not good enough to bring a team even to the second round now. Like, what's wrong with Tatum? So I think that really motivated and drove him to focus on being strong enough to get to the rim and finish, and playing defense, because when he comes out the next season, he does both of those things at a much higher level than he ever did in his entire career. I think you can't talk about the 22 season without talking about the coaching change.
After spending 18 seasons in the Boston front office, Danny Ainge stepped down as president of basketball ops And Brad Stevens, after 8 seasons as head coach, moves from the bench into Ainge's role.
The Boston Celtics, they've hired a new head coach, Ime Udoka, a former NBA player turned assistant coach.
Brad Stevens had been the coach of the Celtics for, I think, 7 years at that point. He had instilled a certain identity in the team, and I think he was one of the first to realize that identity wasn't fitting the current roster.
Bringing in Ime Udoka, there was no longer that premier or that perennial all-star that was looked to be a level above Tatum, right?
At the time, Udoka was exactly what he needed. You know, he was a hard ass who was going to expect everything from Tatum on both ends of the floor.
It was a shock to me. You know, I had no idea, you know, the coaching changes was going to be what it was, especially, you know, the day after the season ended for us. It's still a little weird seeing Brad around and he's not the coach anymore. And I think that's what I'm starting to realize, that change happens a lot in the NBA. It is a business, and I have even more responsibility each year. More so from being like the guy, I think being more vocal, being more of a leader. It's not just all about, you know, on the court stuff. And I'm figuring that out, and it's something that I'm working at as I get more mature, as I get older, more comfortable in what I'm doing, just bringing others together.
The first half of the season, you saw some sparks. They were playing some of the best defense in the league in November, but Tatum was leading offensively. He was getting to the rim more often. Clearly, he had made it a point to get to the rim more, and he was defending more than he ever had in his entire career. And then he goes out.
Diagnosed with his second stint of COVID in the past year, Jayson Tatum would be sidelined for nearly 2 weeks in the middle of the season, capping off a disappointing month of December that saw the Celtics lose 9 of their 15 games. Expectations in Boston had grown significantly for Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and the rest of the roster heading into the 2022 season, as the clock was ticking on an anticipated championship run. Now, for one of the first times in his career, the accusations had begun to point at Jayson.
I was 23, playing for the biggest franchise in the NBA, with the expectations of being the best player, being the best leader, being the best teammate, and being a guy that can take a team to a championship. The doubt came from, you know, you work so hard to get to this point, and you work so hard to be the best player you can be, and everybody's been there where it's like, it's just not going how you thought it would go. And that can be a little discouraging sometimes, because everything that I have, I'm giving it to this game and my team. And we were like 4 games under 500, and it was just like the toughest start to a season that I've had. And, you know, I think part of our profession is like being honest and being candid of like, you know, there are times where I doubt myself. You know, you think about, can I be the best player on a championship team? Because not many guys can. And, you know, it's only the best of the best of the best. But that's what I aspire to be.
The Boston media, the Boston fans, Kendrick Perkins, everybody was talking about, should you break up the Jays?
You know, I didn't feel like it made sense at the time because we've been in the playoffs every year. We've been in the conference finals 3 times. Tough times and uncomfortable situations bring people closer together. And, you know, obviously, you know, the guys going to look to us for a lot of different things. And, you know, we just got to be that much more together and closer, you know, with everything going on.
Until that season, he was never in the headlines, you know, being called out as to being questioned as a star, right? And that was the season it was starting to happen, because there was no more, oh, well, they're being guided by Kyrie, and there was no more, oh, well, he's too young, you know. It was like, well, no, I think this is the time now. You know, you've given him the keys to guide this team. We're gonna just like we give him his flowers when he's doing well, we're gonna criticize him when he's not doing well. And I think that was the first year where he got a lot of criticism that he wasn't used to, but he handled his own, and he adapted, and he responded in a big way.
I'm big on like figuring it out, right? In my mind, it's like, what's the point of me throwing my problems on other people?
Yeah.
Everybody has their own problems, right? And growing up, my idea of being a man was figuring it out, right? Nobody's gonna feel bad for you. Everybody's gonna help you out. You have to have the mindset of like, I need to figure this out. I need to get it done.
They sort of galvanized around his return. They start playing defense. In fact, from January to the end of the season, they're one of the best defenses of all time. And the offense really flows from that.
237, but he has a 7'6" wingspan. Oh! That's a man's chair! Takes it, makes it, and a foul. Tatum again weaving his way to the basket. Oh my goodness!
That second half of the season, it like solidified the fact that Jayson Tatum can lead a team, an elite team.
I just think he started doing things that leaders do, right? I feel like he was holding himself accountable. He would go out and not in a vocal way, but I feel like he led by example. And, for a big chunk of that, I feel like was what the head coach did in the sense of holding these guys accountable, doing things that Brad Stevens would never do, and I think Tatum respected that. I think he wanted a coach like that.
Putting together the most impressive season of his young career, Jayson Tatum would average a then career-high 26.9 points per game, being named to his first All-NBA first-team selection and leading Boston to the number 2 seed in the East. The Celtics had rallied around their young star down the stretch and were now faced with a familiar opponent in round 1 of the playoffs. However, this year, Boston was determined to put the NBA on notice.
Alley-oop to Horford.
Tatum, 6 on the shot clock. Tatum sees it, takes it, makes it!
Celtics have a timeout, decide not to use it here. Brown the drive. Jaylen Brown kicks it out. Smart fakes. Inside, Tatum spins.
I've arrived. I think that's the best way to put it. Fittingly, a 4-game sweep against the Nets, against Kyrie Irving, against Kevin Durant, arguably one of the greatest scorers of all time. I think that's the best way to put it. I've arrived. I'm not the same kid that was looking for guidance and by your locker and trying to catch up. I'm the guy who's trying to take you down. Yeah, you got that one last year, but I got bigger things. We got bigger fish to fry this year. We got a brand new coach. We got the keys to the city, or key to the car, right? I mean, they were leading that team, and I feel like they were like, well, we're going to get it right this time. And I think that first round series was a great way for him to kick that off. That I'm here now, playoff type of run. I mean, we knew he was a star, but I think that was at the moment where we knew this kid he has it. He has enough to guide this team to a championship.
They go into this 7-game war with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Williams, stout defense, threw it to himself. Oh! He's eviscerating the Celtics inside. 24. Smart looking. Tatum catches. Tatum shoots. Tatum scores as the shot clock expires.
And I think probably the crowning moment of Tatum's entire career is the Celtics cough up Game 5 at home, and then you're down 3-2 going into Milwaukee, and what you need is your superstar to pick your team up and will them to victory.
Back 6 on the shot clock. Tatum, step back, 3-pointer. It's good! Jayson Tatum with a masterpiece tonight. Tatum's got to put it up. Step back, 3-pointer. Bang! Jayson Tatum from downtown. Holiday playing physical with Tatum. Tatum on the drive. Lays it in and the foul. Tatum tried to slam it. Somebody got a piece of it. And Jayson Tatum with a chance for a 3-point play.
And I will say, before that point, I think you could have made the argument like Tatum's never really got there when you kind of slay the dragon, where Giannis is regularly recognized as the best player in the NBA at the time. You go into his house, you save the team's season.
Tatum and the Celtics had made a statement in the first 2 rounds, but once again waiting in the conference finals was the team who had eliminated Boston just 2 years prior, as Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat were also on the hunt for the Larry O'Brien trophy, and they would give Boston a fight from the opening tip.
You know, he has to go to war with Jimmy Butler back and forth for 7 games. Probably one of the most exhausting. It was an exhausting series to watch for a fan. I cannot imagine how exhausting it was to play.
Tatum against Martin. Sidestep, three-pointer. Puts it to go. Pritchard a running start. Ahead to Tatum. Tatum throws it down. Tatum spins. Tatum jump shot. Count it and one.
Obviously, it goes without saying, but without him, that team does not make it out of that Milwaukee series, never mind makes their way to the finals.
Finally having broken through to the NBA Finals, after having reached the conference finals 3 times in his first 5 seasons, Jayson Tatum and the Celtics would embrace the opportunity to bring a championship back to the city of Boston. On the other side, the Golden State Warriors had once again climbed back to the top of the West, marking their 6th appearance on the game's biggest stage in less than a decade. Both teams had put together strong postseason runs, but it was the less experienced Celtics who would look to strike first.
Back to Horford for the lead. Boston up by 3. Al Horford in his first NBA Finals. An 11-0 run for Boston. Brown on the baseline. Horford inside. Counted and 1. The Celtics take game 1 of the 2022 NBA Finals.
Game 1 was like a fever dream. And they kind of run the Warriors out of the gym in that 4th quarter. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. There's something here, right?
I mean, one could argue what went right game 1 and what went wrong game 1. It's like the false sense of who the Golden State Warriors are. There wasn't a single player on that Celtics team that had ever played in the NBA Finals. And I think the fact that they somewhat overachieved, right? The way they were scoring and how many 3-pointers everyone had in that game 1 gave them a false identity as to just how dominant the Warriors are, 1, and 2, how long an NBA Final Series truly is. And the Warriors can attest to that better than anybody.
Curry launches a 3. It's good. Curry. It's good. Steph Curry from downtown. Curry a long 3. It's good. Steph Curry from way downtown.
And they used that to their advantage. Draymond Green did so, getting in people's ears, pushing the right buttons. I feel like I think made an impact. And then Steph Curry putting together the best NBA Final appearance he's ever had in his career. You know, was the cherry on top. Was what took that series, into a blowout fashion that last game in Game 6. And the fact that the Celtics just didn't have, any way to combat that. When you look at their roster in a sense of experience. But also, I just felt like guys like Tatum and Brown, or more so Tatum, maybe they were a bit fatigued.
The undercurrent of all that is that Tatum can't make a layup. Like the entire time, and it would hold true for the entire series, is that like every time Tatum tried to drive into traffic or get to the rim, he couldn't make a layup. He couldn't hold on to the ball. I mean, he kind of shrunk in the moment in a lot of ways in that final series. I think he ended up shooting like mid-30s or high 30s from the field. And it was just like those last 3 games were a nightmare. I bet he still thinks about it.
After going up 2-1 on Golden State to begin the series, the Celtics' struggles would catch up to them in 6 games, with the Stephen Curry-led Warriors putting together an impressive comeback to secure the franchise's 7th championship.
It was just like the highest of highs, where everything seems like it's going right, and then the ultimate crash and burn, where you just get like taught a lesson by this better veteran team.
I mean, it was miserable. I never got my heart broken, but I can imagine if somebody got their heart broken.
when I got home, I didn't want to eat. I was mad, I was upset, I was exhausted. And you literally I just stared at the ceiling for hours until I fell asleep. You know, worked so hard. And the kind of up and down season that we had to turn it around and, you know, be one of the best teams and get to the finals and not get over that hump. And, you know, the day after you wake up, it's like waking up from a bad dream and realizing that, you know, you're not dreaming and that you actually, you know, you lost.
You know, Tatum is like, I think, a pretty like chill, low-key guy for the most part. And he just disappeared for a while. He kind of did the Dirk when they lost to the We Believe Warriors. Like Dirk just like went to an abandoned island or something like that. Like he just went completely off the radar. And Tatum did that.
You know, normally every Father's Day we go out the country. I take Deuce somewhere. We just go relax. And it took some convincing, you know, because I didn't want to leave the house for a couple of days. But you know, I was glad I did. And I think that's the best part about being a dad is takes your mind off things. You know, going out the country. He's 4 at the time, so he doesn't really know or, for lack of better words, care that we just lost. You know, he wants me to help him build a sandcastle and go swimming with him.
And then a month or two after, Tatum resurfaced and he was just like, I can't stop thinking about this. I cannot stop thinking about that loss. And you just knew this guy, like every time he lays down in bed and every time he wakes up, the first thing he's thinking about is losing to the Warriors.
You know, I know what it took to get to the finals, you know, and I know how much more it takes to get over that hump. I need for my summer to be different than it was last year and the year before that. I need to prepare better. You know, I hired a chef. I started to eat better. You know, started working on my body even more than I previously was. Because I knew, you know, playing until June, you know, your body has to be prepared for that. So this summer, I was clear about, you know, what I was trying to do and what I wanted to feel like.
The 2023 season has seen Jayson Tatum take on the next level of his evolution on the court. After experiencing the ultimate level of defeat in the previous finals, he and the Celtics have responded in a way that signifies one thing. They're hungry for another shot at the championship.
You've heard Horford gave interviews going into this season about Jayson Tatum and just saying like, he's leading a lot more. His voice has become louder in the locker room.
I more so approach this season as that, you know, I just want to play at an MVP level, which, you know, that means that, you know, I'm playing one of the best players, playing efficiently, both ends of the ball, and we're winning. You know, we got one of the best records, and that we on pace to get back to where we were, and, you know, that we remember how we felt when we came up short, and that, you know, we'll do whatever it takes not to feel that way again.
Tatum against James. Tatum for the touchdown. That is straight butter. Tatum on the cut, takes it all the way and slams it.
It's incredible. It's surreal. I mean, I made a joke with one of my colleagues, Bobby Manning, about how, man, it seems like every 2-3 months he's breaking a new record.
Good ball fake, one more. Tatum. Oh, he caught one. Puts it on Giannis. Tatum's what a spin. John Morant drives it, blocked by Tatum.
I mean, when he's putting together these 40-plus point performances, draining 5-6 3-pointers in one night, I mean, it's incredible. When he's on, he's damn near unstoppable.
He keeps defenses on their toes just because he's so good at everything, right? Like, he's not elite at any one thing, but there's something to be said about being good at every single skill.
Inbound to Smart, bounce past Tatum. Tatum puts up a three. Bang! Jayson Tatum from downtown. What a finish! Are you kidding me?
just like that constant improvement that we've seen. And now he's averaging over 30 points a game. He's almost averaging a double-double last time I checked. And so it's something that you want to see as a fan. I'm sure as a Celtics fan, you want to see your stars that you draft in the first round continuously improve. And somebody who's improved all three of those major stats, like that's crazy impressive. Not a lot of guys do that.
The fact that he has his eyes on sort of the long-term goal as opposed to the short-term goal, I think is the biggest thing for him. He's identified what he needs to do to win at the highest level, and he's really executed that this season.
Jayson Tatum's legacy in the game of basketball is still being written each day. And with the Celtics making yearly playoff pushes, there are countless accolades and moments left to be witnessed by basketball fans across the world. But as we look back at his journey so far, and then look at what may be in his future, it's clear that he's already well on his way to being one of the most talented players the game has ever seen. In fact, if you ask the city of Boston, there's only one thing missing.
You cannot be in the pantheon of Celtics greats if you do not win a title. At least one. Pierce is up there, and he's the only guy with just one.
In this city, it's a championship. I mean, that changes everything. That puts you up. I mean, they'll put your jersey in the rafters after one. You know what I mean?
I think with the way the team is constructed, I think he's already reading the game at a high level. He's going to read the game at an even higher level, and at some point, I do believe he's going to win a title.
I do think that's inevitable. It's just a matter of when. It could be this year. I have a really good feeling that it is this year. But you never know. I mean, the NBA is competitive like that, but I do think it's inevitable that he will capture a title for the Celtics. But in terms of when that happens, it really is up to Tatum.